Okay, we're back. We're live. What is it, Wednesday? It's Wednesday.
Still.
That's Hunter Heaivillin. He agrees with me. It's Wednesday, and it's the day for agriculture. Okay, I would put this under the rubric of, agritech in Hawaii, but maybe it's more like sustainable Hawaii. And we're going to have a show where we talk about urban agriculture in Hawaii with Hunter Heaivillin. And he is with, among other things, Urban Farm Hawaii, and I guess they do urban agriculture in Hawaii.
We do. Yeah, we're a small nonprofit that supports community engagement and sees opportunities to weave ecosystem services and social interactive spaces back into our city fabric.
Okay, so that's well put. So much so that it leads me to ask you what you're studying or what you have studied.
So currently wrapping up my master's in urban and regional planning, where all of my research focus is on urban agriculture in Honolulu and how planning processes have been a barrier and how planning can enable urban agriculture as an industry.
Okay, we'll need about, 6-8 hours to actually cover that?
You can show up to my oral defense later today.
All right, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
Let's start soon. Okay, so urban agriculture, to tell you the framework that I'm working in, and then you can fill the pukas, There's a guy named Kerry Kakazu, who over Aloha Key, at the intersection of Pohukaina and Cook Street, has an indoor farm, and he has hydroponics right there. And he's a PhD in biochem, I think, and so he knows what he's doing, and he's making a farm. That's quite something. There was this really interesting farm facility at the top of the CompUSA building, but I looked through the construction fence just yesterday in Kaka'ako, and there is no CompUSA building. It is a brown field.
It is definitely that.
There's nothing there anymore. So nice try, guys. It seemed like a good idea, but all that's gone. So then I'm thinking. It's just hard for me thinking. Where exactly is there urban agriculture? Frank Fosse's gardens. They still exist?
Yeah, there's still a series of community gardens throughout Honolulu and sort of island-wide that are supported by the city and county and the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Are they healthy? Are they robust? Are they growing? Are people participating?
They are in such a demand that many of them have wait lists where people are showing up to meetings for over a year just to find a plot.
Really?
So there is certainly a latent demand that has yet to be entirely met by city offerings. Part of that comes down to the funding that's apportioned to supporting community gardens, and part of it also comes down to the fact that it's one fellow who is diligently
on behalf of the city. He's a city person.
He's the city guy, who's in charge of
what's his name? Shout out.
Wayne Sasaki.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, Wayne.
Yeah, so he's doing it, making it happen.
Okay, and what about, there's other things too. What about all the aquaponics that we hear about? I didn't say that right. Aquaponics. Aquaponics.
Up to you. Tomato. Yeah, aquaponics
is it happening?
Aquaponics is happening in various places. Another sort of role of mine is I'm the director for the Oahu Farm to School Network. And so in a lot of our school gardens, there's been a serious uptick in interest in aquaponics.
What about
with
in
varying
ordinary houses where ordinary people live?
Yeah, and there's been a lot of programming with that too, particularly in Waimanalo as an opportunity to increase food security, or at least drive people towards the notion that they can have a role in their production.
Okay, all right. So sounds like something is happening, and it also sounds like, I'm just getting this sort of off the wall here, but you're really committed to this. This is a life thing for you.
Yeah, I've been involved with sustainable development locally and internationally for the past 7 or 8 years.
Does that cover more than urban agriculture?
Yes, looking broadly at utilizing permaculture design as a framework for sustainable community development, and running the gamut from things that people need to live. So waste management, water management, everything.
Waste, water, this is important. And if it's not as important as agriculture today, it will be. Well, water will always be more important.
Yeah, we definitely see, for myself, it's that food is often an avenue that everyone has a stake in, pun intended, but that it becomes then a means by which it becomes a means by which you can initiate discussions that really, on the surface, don't appeal to many, particularly say waste management. But when we discuss urban agriculture and we start really looking at food, we realize that it becomes ultimately inherently connected with our water systems, with our waste management, with our economic systems, our social dynamics, and our policies. And so it all ends up being connected, but that food is the sort of the way to open the door to a lot of those broader discussions.
Yes, but why? Why did you get involved in this? Why are you so committed? Why is your box so big?
I guess for myself, I've long operated under the notion that the world that we were born into is not the only one that can exist. And so
when did this happen for you personally?
I was always outdoors as a kid.
Here?
And yeah, I grew up here. And I think just even growing up in Hawaii, there's a certain affinity for the land that is imbued in a lot of our lifestyle, and just the fact that we are on an island. Obviously, it's sort of what we would consider academically as sort of the planetary boundaries or planetary limits we recognize very intimately because we have island limits, and there is only so much space. There can be only so much development. There can only, our resources are clearly recognized as finite. And so the need to steward them is felt a little bit more acutely here, I think, than possibly elsewhere.
Okay, well, let me ask you, aren't you disappointed that what was once a robust, really successful agricultural, engine here in Hawaii has turned into pretty much little or nothing? Aren't you concerned that people don't get it, that the land, is on which to do agriculture is too expensive, it's hard to get, it's hard to permit, and the government really doesn't do much for you, even with the important lands legislation? Mm-hmm. Aren't you concerned that the younger generation, calling them millennials, aside from a handful of people like you, aren't really into it, don't see it, don't want to get their hands dirty? Aren't you concerned that where we had an initiative of diversified agriculture, mm-hmm. after our engineer thinks this is a very funny question.
It's a long question.
It's a long question.
It's a few questions.
We'll see what happens.
Nesting.
I hope you want something to write down?
I might need to, yeah.
Aren't you concerned that where we thought we were going to have diversified agriculture, in the 70s after the closing of all the plantations, we don't. We haven't gotten there. You can't tell me, maybe you can't try, that we really have anything big going on. Aren't you disappointed in that?
I would say the main question you asked is, am I concerned? And I would say yes, which is sort of the impetus for my involvement in a lot of this work. And that I'm not quite sure how to attack the entire scope of that question, but
it wasn't easy.
Yes, there are, from some of my graduate work, I've done analysis of essentially everything from the state constitution down through state plans and all of the plans relevant to agriculture. And while there is a consistent call for diversification of agriculture and a need to bolster food security and sort of driving, in some instances at least, towards food security or food sovereignty as a notion, that
you got to define that for me.
There often ends up being not a lot of teeth behind it, and that our important agricultural lands dedication process and even the sort of designation of agricultural land of importance to the state of Hawaii has largely defined these are things we think are valuable, but actually committing them has been a process slow.
Yeah, well, I'm developing my own theory about this sort of thing. Call it the metronome theory. The metronome theory is that somebody from government gets up and says, agriculture is important, diversified agriculture is important. We have a policy to support and favor and encourage, everybody involved in diversified agriculture. That's when the metronome starts, and it ticks one tick for each day. Tick, okay, nothing happens. Tick, nothing happens. Tick, and so forth. I don't have to do all the ticks for you, but there's a lot of ticks. Nothing happens. When you say a guy like you says, well, maybe I'll get something going here. Maybe I'll study this and I'll find out what the science is. I'll find out how to do it. I'll find out all the planning points. I'll find, it's not Sim City, it's Ag City, And I'm going to do something. And then in the background, there's always that days go by, ticking, and nothing happens. And then now you're 30, now you're 40, and you look around and say, I wrote a lot of stuff, talked to a lot of people, appeared on a lot of ThinkTech shows, but tick, tick, tick. What do you think?
Well, I think that speaks to the need for ThinkTech to have a broader audience, right? To continue expanding. No, I would say that I definitely arrived from work in environmental education and farm to school programming, and I would say sort of playing with farming, that I consistently recognized that there were sort of policy barriers frequently, and that's why I took the step to get into planning and to sort of begin understanding that realm, to be able to sort of jump scales and recognize what the needs are from a producer standpoint or from the perspective of a consumer that's interested in having access to local food that's not only produced in a manner that they feel is cognizant of the needs of our broader environment, but is also economically accessible.
Well, so what's your dream? I mean, the one you want to come true.
Short term, I would love to see policies that will enable an urban agriculture industry in Honolulu. I found that for myself, and this is all very self.
Are you limiting yourself to urban? Are we excluding the Big Island?
I think
Maui
that,
and,
well, for the purposes of the research that I've been doing and the emphasis of at least a couple of the organizations that I work with, they are either Oahu-based or particularly Honolulu-based.
in an urban setting. With
It's looking at
big
an urban
buildings,
setting. We have
industry, condominiums, all that.
leagues of research and still a deficit of funds that go into supporting rural agricultural activity. And
We're not talking about that today.
But going forward, we still have to face that most of our planet is increasingly urbanized. And so while we have many opportunities to an understanding of what could be done to sort of modify agricultural productive systems at a rural scale, the understanding of how we can actually start addressing our quality of life in urban areas as we increasingly become more dense and are housed more closely, we need to look at how we can maintain a quality of life and how we can restore ecosystem services to make the urban places that we are now flooding towards habitable
So what is
and
it
also
like? What
enjoyable.
is it like? I have a pear tree in my backyard. I go pick dessert.
That's one avenue, yeah. But it runs from scale, right? So there can be people that are interested in the production aspect, people that are interested in processing or distribution or sales or just consumption.
We're talking about a whole big agricultural factory right in the city then.
An agricultural factory that's not necessarily even centralized, that we're looking at opportunities, and there have been pilot projects to produce land or public food on public lands. We had a pilot project trying to establish an urban food forest right in downtown. We've been involved with other projects where we were looking at diversified production in vacant lots and backyards, just within a single valley.
So in your dream, are we doing, what, 100% of our food in urban settings?
I don't think that's necessarily ideal, nor, I mean, I'm not.
What are you looking for?
I think the percentages are continuously elusive. I think really what it will come down to is, are industries that would like to happen locally able to do so? And I would feel that from my experience, and maybe it's a sort of a perspective bias based off of the circles I run in, but that there is a latent demand for land with sufficient tenure in urban areas to allow for production.
So you want to make it possible for an industry in urban agriculture to grow, improve our quality of life, and all the good things that flow out of that. And I know that's what you want. Now I know. And do you know what I want?
I do not.
I want to take a break.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to take a break. That's Hunter Heaivillin, and he's with Urban Farm Hawaii, Urban Farm Hawaii, and other things. He's a graduate student at UH in the planning department, taking, what, a PhD?
I'm wrapping my master's.
Wrapping my master's.
Yeah.
And we're here on Sustainable Hawaii, talking about urban agriculture in Hawaii, and I suppose largely in Honolulu. We'll be right back.
Hello, my name is Kenneth Lawson. I'm your host here at Life in the Law. I'm really interested in law as I practiced it for 18 years before coming to Hawaii. I practiced criminal law and civil rights law on the mainland. Now I teach law at the University of Hawaii Law School, William S. Richardson School of Law, and I bring in guests who are very current on legal issues that affect your life here in Hawaii. Come and join me every Wednesday at 1 p.m. as we explore how the law affects you, how the law is changing, and why it's important that you should care about what's going on in your community. See you then.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Hunter Heaivillin, who is with Urban Farm Hawaii. He's a graduate student, a master's candidate, wrapping his master's, and he's doing planning, and that takes us to Sustainable Hawaii and urban agriculture in Hawaii, which we really need and can do, right? So your dream, what are the steps to realize your dream? What do we need to do?
Well, we have some. There are a few different ways to attack it. There are definitely some zoning barriers that, despite our Right to Farm Act, preclude and really in analysis of our planning documents, we really recognize or place agriculture as an exurban affair. And a lot of zoning has increasingly pushed agricultural processes outside of city bounds. And so modifications to those are an opportunity. Whether or not that's necessary remains to be seen, but I think there are some more broad, say, policy actions that could take place.
We're going to talk about those. But first, let's look at a picture. I feel the picture coming on. It's coming. There it is. Okay, what is that picture?
So this is a picture from a GIS analysis. So we took some lovely data that was collected up, and did an analysis of all the lands that are not in conservation, that are less than 30% slope, greater than 500 square feet, and that are either in bare soil or grass or low shrubs. And so this is an effort to try and understand what the extent of arable land in Honolulu is.
Where is that?
That's an overview of the university area. And so you can see the breakdown of ownership from large landowners to essentially private or other landowners, and then also analysis of city parks.
Oh.
And so there's three of those.
How do you make a picture like that?
You make friends with people who are good with GIS.
And then you make friends with crayons.
Yeah. So fortunately, that was completed through a connection with UH West Oahu and Dr. Albie Miles, who's setting up their Sustainable Community Food Systems undergraduate program, and he was able to help me out with some GIS support, and through their folks at Pacific Cartography.
So I mean, it points out an interesting point. I mean, it's accidental that would be the picture that we would talk about at this point in time, but in an island state, you have always, with everything, you have to look at the land. You have to see if there is land, and you have to see what kind of land, and who has control of the land, and who regulates the land, and so forth. And boy, we have that, spades. You know, since 1848,
Yep.
the year of the Great Heaivilin. And in my view, we need another one. Maybe it should be an agricultural Heaivilin. Maybe 2015 going to be a big year for the agricultural Heaivilin.
That would be quite a different setting, yes.
Let's look at another picture for the stimulation. Oh, that's the same one. That's a different
Still
one.
stimulating, but
Still stimulating.
that's the same one.
Land ownership. Okay, and what's the blue? Who's the blue?
So the blue are the large landowners. So that's looking at the Kamehameha schools, the essentially folks that hold a lot of stead of land in the state. And so in terms of Mahele, we don't necessarily see the need for disrupting all of that ownership, but definitely see opportunities. And then this is already happening at least in Kaka'ako, with access to lands. So they might still own the land, but saying that we're able to come in and utilize it.
Yeah, right. That's the first question. Second question is, what can you grow? So, question, Hunter, what can you grow?
I think it's more a question of what can you not grow. I mean, we have
everything. You can grow everything except the stuff you can't grow.
Because of our tropical climate and our diversity of microclimates, we have a significant amount of spread or breadth of production.
We have.
And so yeah, that's actually an image of a harvest I did in Honolulu. So we've got in there taro, papayas, chard.
We're growing all of that in
There's
urban
a whole
settings?
Right, yeah, all of these are from right within Honolulu.
Ooh, tell me what kind of settings are growing such sophisticated crops?
These are backyards. There's a rice crop of sticky rice that I'd produced. So everything from small regular house lots to places that have a little bit more land to knowing where to go and forage.
Foraging. Yeah. Maybe I need a fence behind my. But you know, is this you know, sort of incidental growing, you know, occasional growing, or is this serious harvest after harvest, you know, on a scheduled basis?
All of that was produced in a sort of just an incidental. I would say it's not. None of that is commercially farmed by any stretch. So it's just things that are, I would say, casually managed. And part of that whole aspect of what we can grow, it's more about how do we choose the right things to grow in the right place. And so the framework that I've sort of come with is that we're looking for, through an analysis of the particular climate aspects, the soil, solar radiation, all these various things.
So can you tell, if I went back to the map, no need to go back to the map, but if I went back to the map and said, okay, on this lot over here, we can grow this, and we have to do that. I mean, are you making those kinds of judgments?
I do that I teach folks about how to do that process and do that design process. I do that as a consulting opportunity through my business, and then also I'm in the process of compiling different data sets to ideally streamline that to make it more accessible for folks. So that would be essentially an application that compiles various data sets and then from the outputs of those cross-references with species lists. So then you have an understanding, essentially a quick snapshot of here's how much rain you get, how much sun, here's what your soil's like, and here's the plants you can grow.
When you're talking about a lot of people who are not necessarily, akamai about this, I talk about something that's, complex and maybe risky in terms of losing the crop, that kind of risk. If you gave them a computer program or a website with this kind of data, it could make life a lot easier.
That's the idea, yeah. So we're working towards that.
Yeah, that's great. The software is the center of everything we do.
It certainly can make things easier.
I see one coming on. I see it. It's coming. An animal
Wait for
picture.
it.
There, an animal picture.
Yeah, and so this is another precluded land use. So
precluded, meaning you cannot?
Essentially, yeah, that the legal aspects surrounding animal husbandry in our cities, in most of our zoning areas, mean that the housing, the actual structure that they would be housed in, has to be so far from a property line that it really means that most places cannot actually have them. But these are actually urban goats born within Honolulu.
Did you pick that photograph because they're cute?
Yeah, they're exceedingly cute. Why?
So
who could argue against this?
Yeah, right. But what do you do with a goat?
They are actually. I have a fleet of goats that do grazing.
A fleet?
A bevy. I'm not sure what goat. A kit. Yeah.
I have no idea.
They're just so cute. It's magnificent.
So do you have it on land where you're permitted to have it?
Yes. So the way that it works out is that landowners that need grazing, I essentially show up with the animals and they do babysitting and get free lawn mowing and land care. And then once the area's been brought under control, I move them on to another place. This
reminds me of the photovoltaic, the original photovoltaic installation in Lanai, the one that Murdoch did years ago. It's quite substantial, maybe 10 years ago almost. And it was the biggest one by far of its time. And they have animals under the PV.
They make spectacular lawnmowers.
Yeah, and it looks great. It looks like and the animals are happy. They can get shade when they want. It's perfect for them. Why don't we do that everywhere? What's holding us back?
I've seen it on a few islands. It's definitely doable. I mean, I think part of the issue with that is that we start sort of how do we make land use decisions, right? So taking what is conceivably arable land or agricultural land and then covering it with solar panels is at our highest land use when we have so many rooftops that are still available.
Yes.
And that's sort of another question that I often come to, particularly in regards to aquaponics, is that it's frequently said oh well, we should just be doing aquaponics in this area, when there's no reason that we couldn't be doing terrestrial production or aquatic production, but that it's taking. I think there's often this drive towards a technological fix for something that's really just a deficiency of understanding.
How are we going to fix that? It seems like us and agriculture, we somewhere after the plantations closed down, we made a giant chasm, and we don't care about it. And the expertise we used to have, which was legend, which was global, we don't have that expertise anymore. Now it's the comeback trail, and the government is the last one to come back. So what I hear you saying is, among other things, I hear a lot in what you're saying, is that the government needs to get more knowledgeable about this and do smarter things in land use. They're out there. They're actually watching you, Hunter. What do you tell them? Tell them. Talk to the whole square building at the same time. What do you say?
Well, I think there is a particularly magnificent opportunity with regards to what's already been set up as enterprise zones. So within the enterprise zones around the state, you can have essentially business support from not paying general excise tax or support for state taxes, and agriculture is one of the businesses that meets that qualification. But agriculture is not an accepted land use in many of the areas, at least in Honolulu, where there is an enterprise zone. So expanding and sort of seeing those as also urban agriculture incentive zones and having a trial period or a relaxation of zoning law to support dedication of some lands, vacant lands in those areas, to agriculture. And that means that for a producer, I don't have to commute from Honolulu, where most people live, to somewhere else to farm. And so it's finding land in the city where we're close to labor, we're close to markets. We're almost certain to have water access already. And so a lot of the infrastructure problems that come up as a barrier, whether it's cooling sheds or transportation costs, with rural agriculture and bringing things to market, are reduced because we can produce right here.
All things considered, are you saying, I'm thinking of balloon farms, you know, huge tracts of land. I mean, it's really idyllic actually out there. It's beautiful. Too bad they got to turn into houses. But are you saying that you can, with all the modern technology and the savings of energy and moving crops and whatnot around, are you saying that you can be as efficient in an urban setting, in urban agriculture, as, say, a large tract of conventional agriculture can be?
I would say that it's not even necessarily on urban agriculture, but it tends to be that small farms that are intensively managed often can reach higher productivity. And that's not to say that there is no role for rural agriculture or peri-urban agriculture even. I don't see it as a one or the other. I see it mainly as that we have significant opportunities to not just produce food in the city, but to really ameliorate some of the negative aspects of urbanization as well. And it's not that we're going to be growing all of our staple crops. You know, we're not going to have fields of rice back in Waikiki or whatnot. But there are many things.
Maybe turn the whole jungle back into rice. You know?
It's been certainly a notion.
Same thing about
supported it at one point or another. But there, even if it's not a panacea, it still affords many opportunities.
Okay, now we're gonna. I feel it coming on again. We're gonna take a break.
Okay.
However, when we come back, I'd like you to address the question of, if the legislature knew what to do, who would they be talking to? Who would they be incentivizing and encouraging? Who are the people who, you know, are the likely prospects to participate? Okay, that's Hunter Heaivillin. He's with Urban Farm Hawaii. He's a graduate student finishing his master's. He's in the planning department, and today we're talking about sustainable Hawaii. We're talking about urban agriculture in Hawaii. Long time coming. I'm Jay Fidell. That's Hunter Heaivillin. We'll be right back.
This is Alice Lee Hagan, host of ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My show here at ThinkTech Hawaii is every Thursday from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. I bring in interesting guests from Hawaii, the mainland, and hopefully international guests in the future. Do join us on Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're live. But here we are with Hunter Heaivillin and making great progress in trying to reimagine, you know, Honolulu, to find a way to, you know, build it up as a completely sustainable community that we will all love. You know, I love to have green. If I can eat it, that's even better. But even without eating it, I love to have green. I can't imagine any urban space being planned these days without, you know, public spaces for people to enjoy, and in the public spaces, somehow green. So if I give you a park, for example, we'll get back to the point in a minute. If I give you a park where people can walk through the park, why not separate part of that park out and just have it as agriculture? And, you know, you don't walk through that part, but it actually grows things. Why not do that?
The walking through and the growing things don't have to be mutually exclusive either. So we at one point there were some funds allocated in the city budget that we were to the Parks and Rec, where we were working with them on developing a pilot food forest in urban Honolulu. And there remain a lot of opportunities. I mean, the Parks Department is, I would say, has a lot on their plate. We have a lot of park space that requires a fair amount of management, and transitioning some of that into private management or community management. To have either commercial farms or community gardens or public food areas, I think there's a significant opportunity for that. And also it becomes a mechanism by which people can interact with our city. I feel like because of generally in Honolulu we have sort of a reluctant urbanism, reinforced by, you know, around the state. Rarely is it, at least from living and all my friends on the outer islands, say, you know, at Honolulu it's going really well. And I think that's certainly reinforced by a lot of us here, and I think part of that comes from the sort of the thread to the sort of heritage land ethic of Hawaiian culture and its emphasis on stewardship and taking care of the land, and that draws in great contrast to what we feel to be happening in our city. And so I find urban agriculture to bridge those two notions of this sort of stewardship aspect, but as well recognizing and being cognizant of our urban needs and our changing cityscape.
There's another thing. It's the community thing.
Yeah.
It's an interaction with the environment.
It's an interaction with the environment where we can get away from that sort of extinction of experience. You're not going to value environmental things if you've never had an interaction with them.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a space by which we are producing food, we're reducing stormwater flows, we are improving air quality, reducing the urban heat island effect, as well as being a social space where people can come together that wouldn't necessarily otherwise, whether from various walks of life, because everyone eats, and it becomes a mechanism by which there can be social interaction and environmental
Food is all about social interaction. It really is, and Hawaii is all about food, honestly.
It's a great thing.
I worry about people saying, well, I mean, I would say that GMO crops are going to be efficient in some areas, beyond conventional crops. And then there'll be people who will say, no, you can't have GMO crops anywhere. Where do you sit on that?
I would say that there is potential for modification of species to have positive impacts, but that from my perspective, a lot of the modifications that have happened are not necessarily benefiting those that they're supposed to.
You saw the thing about potatoes?
I did.
It was very interesting. It's a contradistinction kind of thing.
It was fascinating
a new idea.
That we are deciding to spend our research dollars to keep frying potatoes, but have that be less carcinogenic.
Yes, you're right. I think you're right on with that. Let me explain what happened with the potatoes. 2 or 3 days ago, the paper reported that we now have potatoes rolling out on the market that are GMO potatoes, which don't have the carcinogens or the compounds that make carcinogens when you fry them, either into potato chips or into French fries. And the old national diabetic problem, the obesity problem, it's all about that. And so instead of addressing the diabetes problem and the French fry problem, we'll make potatoes that don't have the same kind of carcinogens. I mean, it's really interesting how that works. It's a societal
It's
maneuver.
a bit perverse, yeah. But the thing is that a lot of the issues that are faced, or that are addressed through, say, genetic modification, in many ways can be ameliorated through diversification. And despite the fact that we have consistent calls in all of our planning documents for diversified agriculture and supporting that process, the notion that we may, at least on some time scale, have less productivity is untenable. And so this sort of cleaving to growth.
I knew you'd take me back there, but where we are is who? The legislature agrees with you now. I mean, this is, when I say hypothetical, I'll agree. Hypothetical on the far side. Okay, but they agree because of what you said to the camera not too long ago. And they want to encourage.
Because of that.
Yes, because of that. I don't know how you did that, Hunter. So now they changed their minds. They're going to actually take affirmative action. But they have to address it to people. They have to incentivize people. There have to be people who step forward. Who?
I think there are leagues of particularly young folks that are interested and engaged with our food system and are passionate about making these types of shifts and entering production, but that often access to land and tenure issues or infrastructure costs are often prohibitive. And so even, for example, in a lot of the projects going on, say, in rural areas, that even to gain capital, to access a loan, you have to have been farming for some amount of time. But if you're a young person that's interested or just coming out of a ag program, there aren't many opportunities for that. And frequently, those are tied to land tenure. And so maybe finding an opportunity, and with the notion that while most businesses that start don't persist beyond, say, 10 years, you're doing pretty good, right? Most fail. But that we can still work with the sort of shorter term tenure aspects to say, all right, there's a vacant parcel here. I can come and farm that. It could conceivably, if allowed to have an agricultural dedication, which happens on other agricultural land, could save money for the landowner. I get access to land that has infrastructure and access to markets because I'm right in the city. And I think a lot of people would gravitate to that because it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're driving for an hour and a half just to get to your farm, because you can live nearby even if you can't live on it.
I think it's a kick to be productive and make your own food. An interesting part of the demographic that might warm to this is the retired crowd. Who luckily they have homes. They haven't lost their homes yet. They have a little space. Maybe it's an old home with a real backyard. And you could consult with them, couldn't you? You could show them how to do this.
We do.
Yeah.
Tell
me what you do.
So that's another role. So part of it is consulting, but then another is facilitating folks making the transition from, or the way I often phrase it is, transitioning from individual consumers with rights to a community of producers with responsibilities. And so through that, with that in mind, we teach 2 permaculture design certificate courses annually, which are all about sustainable human settlement and the various trappings required to make something like that happen.
Is it hard? A lot of people don't like to go to school, you know?
It really doesn't feel like school. On our weekend course, we're in a different part of the island every weekend, and it really runs the gamut. We've had everything from one girl who was just finishing high school to folks that are retired after PhDs in Harvard, and so it really runs the gamut of folks who are just getting into farming, people who have been producing for a long time, people that are just sort of somewhere in the middle.
You know, one of the problems that Loon Farms had, may still have, I don't know, is employees, you know, agriculture employees. But what you just said really strikes me is that you could have, say, a retired family with that backyard, big enough to actually do stuff, urban agriculture, you know, really, in Manoa, why not? Plenty of rain, okay, and then you could have some kids, maybe students, who would work cheap or free, you know, and who would be in a kind of partnership with the retired people and take some of the food, what have you. And what it waits for, I think, because the old folks can't do it all themselves. I mean, manual labor may be taxing, and it will be increasingly taxing as they get older. But the young kids, you know, they can do that. And so what it waits for is a structure where those 2 sides of the demographic can collaborate. If in your consulting you could build a structure, call it a partnership, call it an LLC, or whatever you want to call it.
It's called Manoa Grow Up.
Oh,
yeah. It
already exists.
Yeah.
Why do I feel I'm running uphill on this?
So that project was
maybe.
Instead of having young folks work for free or cheap, which most of us aren't really excited about, despite the fact that we increasingly don't have any other choice, that we see it as a business opportunity. So it's saying, you have an interest in productivity in your land, we can come and farm that, you get a portion of the produce, and we'll sell the rest to local restaurants. And so it's taking,
help them do
we're in the process of working it out, and so we've gone through and looked at different models that have happened other places, and also are looking at the ways that there are still policy mechanisms that could support this. Someone saying, yeah, sure, come potentially mess up my grass, is, you know, they have to have a certain ethos behind it.
Yeah.
But if we could say, modify the ruling for agricultural dedications, and they could dedicate that land to agriculture for 1, 5, 10 years and get a tax break, then it behooves, you know, that opens it up to a much broader set of folks that could be interested, and thus enables an industry to sort of rise up to meet that.
So you could help me sort of conceptualize all of that.
Okay.
In the structure, in the incentives, if there are, hopefully, and in the technology, because I consider farming technology really is. That's pretty good. So how can they reach you if they wanted to get involved? What's your best website address?
I think we could get me at urbanfarmhawaii.com or apcrd.org. It's probably the best. The Asia Pacific Center for Regenerative Design.
Yes, that's the other one. I saw that. Yeah.
Or at the Oahu Farm to School Network.
So where are you going actually, Hunter? What is?
I'm leaving here, and then I'm going to go defend my master's.
What, today?
Today. So.
Holy moly!
Yeah.
Well, I hope.
And then this evening we have an event called Honolulu Soup, where there will be 3 different urban agriculture entities kicking their wares, and you will get to eat soup and then vote on whose project gets support.
Where is that?
That will be at the Proto Hub, I believe.
Oh, right down in Kaka'aka. Yeah. Shauna Trevena.
Yeah, Samantha Ruiz and Stuart Coleman are backing it up.
Okay.
So.
Oh, you're part of that crowd. That's good. And you should be, and they should be with you. It's all, you got to work together.
Yeah, we have
Never
many
let go.
overlapping partnerships. So.
Yeah. Well, what a show. And thank you to Emily Inoue Lau, who put this together. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks for the ride.
She's there out there saying, who gave Hunter a ride despite his flat tire. This has been a very interesting experience, and what makes it, you know, phenomenal for me is you're going to go straight from here to defend your masters. Good luck, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll see you again for sure.
Hope so.
You're a great voice in an important issue.
Appreciate it.
That's Hunter Heaivillin, Urban Farm Hawaii, here on Sustainable Hawaii, talking about urban agriculture in Hawaii, and we will discuss this again. Aloha.